everyone can enjoy music. In the same way, everyone can use some yoga practices. They don't have to be like seasoned practitioners for 20 years of meditation and stuff like that. That is the major idea behind our acute exercises. Like, you don't have to be a seasoned yoga practitioner. Even if you do the exercise for 5 minutes, you will see changes in your system.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Szabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. We've got a really interesting show in store for you today. Our guest is Sundara Balasubramanian. He is a scientist at the Medical University of South Carolina. And in addition to studying how radiation is used for treating cancer patients, he also studies the effects of yoga on our biology. And he's here to talk with us about some of his research. Really excited to have him on the show. Sundar, welcome.
Thank you. It is great to be here.
So you were born in Tamil Nadu in India. Did you learn yoga as part of your upbringing there?
Yes, we are part of a large family. It's a joint family. My father, I would say, he's my first guru. So he would take me to our open terrace and teach me a couple of asanas, and it's part of my morning routine. So he was my first guru. He taught me several exercises, and then we also have a lot of family members, our extended family members, who would be teaching me other techniques. So like in the later years, I had a grandfather. Here it is called a great uncle. So he used to teach some of the pranayama techniques. And my other uncle, he's also a good asana practitioner. He's still practicing. He's about 70 years old right now. So he still practices asanas, and he's very, very good. So this family background gave me an opportunity to learn the techniques early on. Later, when I went for college, that's another area where I learned so many other yoga techniques, which I can elaborate later in the conversation.
Did you get into medicine to explore these realms of yoga, or was it a different drive that got you into medicine?
Yeah, actually, I would say the drive within me was to explore how the natural medicine system works. So that is the basic thing I got into biochemistry to begin with. So when I was in my high school, my father sent me to one of my uncle's clinic. He is a Siddha medical practitioner. So we practice the system called the Siddha, which is very ancient. It is rooted in the Tamil language. So my uncle and several other people in the family, they're also practitioners of the Siddha medicine. So the uncle's clinic that I went was the one that, kind of stimulated my interest in going to chemistry. So my uncle would always tell me, okay, you have to know what is in this root. You have to know what is the nature of this salt and why we purify this, why we use this combination. So you have to understand and know this in a pure chemistry background. That's what his teachings were early on. So I was kind of interested in studying chemistry, and I was fortunate to have a very wonderful chemistry teacher. So he got me interested in organic chemistry. That's why I did my chemistry, basically, for my bachelor's. So during my bachelor's, I was really good and interested in organic part of the chemistry. So what happens was during the the final year of the bachelor's, we had a clinical chemistry paper. So that one introduced me to the biological system or biological side of the chemistry. So that subsequently, made me to take biochemistry for my master's. So from that onwards, I had my career in the biochemistry area. So the basic idea is that when I took the biochemistry, it is where we can use the chemistry basis, right? The chemical basis of life, how it is working inside the living systems. That is something that I wanted to pursue. So all the training, all these years have kind of the forming the basis for learning the newer techniques, learning the modern biological tools. And then my ultimate goal is to use these to understand the ancient scientific system.
Well, I love the potential for the interaction between the East and West, where you're taking these empirical sciences that have been practiced for thousands of years in places like India, and then bringing it and kind of comparing it versus the empirical sciences of the West, so we can really get a sense of, okay, well, what's measurable and what's happening in ways that we haven't really been able to measure in our past history before, which I think it's so fascinating now that we're getting all of this research done in the realm of yoga in particular. Tell us about some of the research that you do in the context of yoga.
So, as you mentioned, some of the things that has been done so far in yoga research is that the measurements were basically kind of subjective measures, say a questionnaire, quality of life questionnaire. How do you feel after this exercise? Are you able to sleep well? Is there any pain? Has your pain reduced? So, things like that. And also some approaches would, question or interrogate things like what happens to the blood pressure or your ECG measurements or things like that. So not really anything was done in the literature about how acute practices change the biochemistry. So that's where I was very much interested in understanding what biological stimulus or how the system responds biochemically to some of these exercises. That was my first question. So this question started from my one of the poems from the ancient literature called Tirumantiram. This was written by Saint Tirumular. So when I was reading this work, this is a huge volume. It's a 3,000 poem book. When I was reading it, there was one particular poem on the yogic breathing or the pranayama. That poem talks about how long to inhale, how long to hold, how long to exhale, and which nostril to use. And all those information was there in that book. So when I started practicing that one, I observed within myself, there's more stimulation of saliva. We know from the system, from biology, we know that it is the kind of the outcome of your parasympathetic nervous system activation or the relaxation response. So when relaxation happens, the first response would be the salivation, lacrimation, so things like that. So I was very intrigued by knowing what is in the saliva, because commonly people think that saliva is just a digestive fluid. So I wanted to ask, is there anything else beyond just salivary amylases or digestive enzymes in there? We know that cortisol has been used as a stress marker in saliva in many different conditions or studies. I wanted to study what are the other substances in the saliva. And I came up with a list of compounds, potential compounds. So one of them was nerve growth factor. I was fascinated towards that because nerve growth factor was involved in Alzheimer's disease. People with Alzheimer's have reduced level of nerve growth factor. I had a wonderful collaborator, Dr. Szabo Minzer. So he was the first one I approached to start this study. So he was very, very supportive, and he challenged me. Can you show that the nerve growth factor is there in the saliva? So he in fact supported and challenged me, and then that made me to start this work really seriously, and then did the research. So this is a pilot study that we did at the Medical University of South Carolina using some of the funding from. Initially, the funding was from the South Carolina Clinical and Translational Research, and subsequently for the same study, we got private funding from another yoga research foundation called the Pure Action from Texas. So what we found first was that people who practice this pranayama or the yoga breathing exercises, they produce more nerve growth factor in their saliva. So this has a huge impact in the diseases like Alzheimer's or in general memory, learning and stuff like that, because the nerve growth factor that is produced in the saliva can be transported to places like the central nervous system through specific mechanisms. It's called the retrograde axonal transport. It doesn't have to go through the blood-brain barrier, which is a problem for many compounds that we use today to treat the disorders of the brain. So this mechanism can bypass, or it doesn't have to go through that blood-brain barrier. So it can directly get absorbed into the brain. So that was really a cool way to think that, okay, so things that are produced in the saliva are not going to stay there, or we are not going to be swallowing it or spitting it out. It can be absorbed transported to specific places or multiple places. There are so many other possibilities how this could be transported. So that was our first finding.
Well, if I can jump in there, just out of kind of curiosity. So what I'm hearing from you is that you in this research that there was differences in the nerve growth factor between people that you were measuring that were doing specific pranayama exercises and people that were not doing any breathing. Let's say, like, is this normally found in saliva in some amounts and just more in people that are doing the pranayama? Was it only a specific pranayama this was happening, or is it just breathing exercises in general? Was that clarified at all with your research?
Yes. So our control group was attention control, which means that they'll be sitting calm, that is quietly. Everything else is controlled. So they'll be sitting one-on-one with the instructor in the same room, same space and everything. They'll be, instead of doing any breathing exercises, they will be reading a manuscript or a paper. So that paper will not have anything that is mood changing, like not a humorous one or anything that is emotionally challenging. It is just some dry research papers, so to speak. So they'll be looking at those ones. So we did not, so as I mentioned, this is a pilot study. We did not compare different breathing exercises. We did only one sitting. This is a single session. For 10 minutes, they'll be doing the pranayama or the Om chanting, and then the 10 minutes, they would be doing the Tirumular pranayama. So that, as we explained in the paper, that is the breath holding exercise from Tirumantram. So we would be collecting saliva at 0 minutes, 5, 10, 15, and 20 minutes. So this is a single session acute exercise. So the difference in nerve growth factor was found at the 20 minutes. So we measured at the 0 minutes and 20 minutes. There was a stimulated nerve growth factor in people who practiced the pranayama. So again, there is a basal level of nerve growth factor in everybody, but the nerve growth factor that is present in everyone is not the active form. So to be active, it has to be converted. So what we found in people that did the pranayama exercises was the active form. So that is the major thing. So it is stimulated after the exercise.
Well, and you said something as well that I'm curious about. So did it seems like the research showed that in the first few minutes you weren't having this, but it took about 20 minutes for this effect to really take hold. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we measured at the 0 and 20 minutes the nerve growth factor. The nerve growth factor measurement was done at 0 and 20 minutes. We measured other molecules at the in between time points. For example, later in the subsequent studies, we measured another protein called DMBT1. That's called the deleted in malignant brain tumors 1. That protein is a tumor suppressor. So normally cells have the tendency upon stress and then upon exposure to multiple mutagens, they have the tendency to become tumor cells. So that transformation is suppressed by several molecules or proteins called tumor suppressors. So those tumor suppressors can block or suppress the transformation of tumor formation. So here is the molecule, the DMBT1, that is stimulated after the breathing exercise. That comes up even as early as 5 minutes. So there are changes that are happening very acutely. Some of the things, even within 5 minutes, you can see some of the stress-related molecules are going down, which means you don't have to be doing these exercises for 20 minutes to see some of the changes. Some of them can really happen quickly, as low as 5 minutes.
Excellent. And you had mentioned something earlier I just want to kind of go back to as well, because you had mentioned it in a talk of yours that I was watching about the connection between dry mouth and stress, which obviously then relates to the saliva response. I was wondering if you could talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah. So we know that when we are stressed, we are going to have dry mouth. And dry mouth is also a problem in several conditions. For example, Sjogren's disease, where the person's own salivary gland cells are destroyed by their own immune system. So they will have dry mouth, dry eyes, their mucosal surface is dried. That is one condition. And scleroderma. Scleroderma has a secondary Sjogren's syndrome. That condition, or as we age, we reduce the production of saliva due to so many factors, and radiation therapy especially in the head and neck region, that affects the salivary glands. So in many of these conditions, dry mouth is a major problem. Dry mouth is not only it has several consequences. Number one, you won't be able to swallow the food, taste the food, or we won't be able to digest it properly, and it affects the quality of life drastically. So it is not just saliva. There are so many things associated with saliva. As we know, there are at least 1,166 proteins in the saliva, and those proteins have a wide range of activities. Especially there are several neurohormones, and those could be changing how we are feeling. So that the reason why dry mouth could be associated with the mood disorders is like that. So it is important to attend to dry mouth. So here, these techniques, by changing, by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, it is giving an impulse or stimulating that parasympathetic nervous system or the relaxation response, and then activates the salivation. And in pranayama literature, there are so many ways, not only this exercise, there are so many other exercises that can be useful to stimulate saliva.
So perhaps, if someone's giving a big talk or something like that and they get a dry mouth, it's not just about drinking water to wet the mouth again, it's the properties of the saliva itself. So it's a matter of focusing on breathing and things like that and calming down, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. Drinking water is good.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, but these ones are definitely helpful, these exercises. This morning I was at a meeting, so there was one lady who was coming to me after the meeting and said, I should be one of the subjects for you. My mouth was just, the saliva was flowing. So things like that happen. Even if you just stop the shallow breathing, take a moment, listen to your breathing, and slow down on the breathing, do some diaphragmatic breathing, you will notice that how relaxing it is. That relaxation will definitely, stimulate the salivation.
Well, it sounds like this wasn't specifically tested in the studies that you've done, but I'm really interested. One of the things that really kind of sparked my interest when I was looking at your research was that in Taoism in particular, and a lot of these Qigong practices, the saliva is actually a big part of the conversation. You hold the saliva in your mouth. When you're done doing your energetic practices, you actually move your tongue around in your mouth to stimulate more saliva, and then you swallow it. And in the tradition, it's said to hold qi. It's holding this creative life force within it. It sounds like it's holding a lot of really amazing biochemical things in it as well. But I'm curious, just in terms of with your knowledge as a biochemist, as a scientist, is it more beneficial if we are stimulating saliva to keep it in the mouth as long as possible in terms of how it's being absorbed in the body, or is swallowing it fine? Should we delay swallowing? What's your opinion on that?
So in yoga tradition also, it is said that holding the saliva until this exercise is done, such and such exercise is done, that is also a common practice. And it is very interesting to see how various practices are pointing to that. You can, in some places, Quran, some of my friends, I have heard that Quran also has mentioned about saliva, like how saliva could be a curative thing. So getting back to your question, keeping the saliva in mouth is beneficial in multiple ways. As I mentioned, it allows the time for absorption through multiple routes. For example, through the retrograde axonal transport to the nervous system, the central nervous system. And what can happen is that the principles present in the saliva, for example, some immunoglobulin molecules that can fight against germs, can be present in the oral cavity for a longer time. So you can, one of the things that you will see in the dental clinic is the dry mouth. The dry mouth is always associated with dental caries. So having the saliva flowing in the mouth is a good way to wash or neutralize germs present in the oral cavity. The other thing is the sublingual absorption route. That is you probably have heard about that in psychoactive drugs. So that goes directly into the system, directly into the system without going to the gut. So that has a direct impact on the overall system's biology without going through the circulation, right? Without going through the gut. The other possibility is that when you have the saliva in the mouth for a longer time, there is a possibility that you will be inhaling some of the aerosols, so it can go into your lungs. So what happens is those proteins that are present in the saliva, either it is immune response proteins or it is proteins responsible for antioxidant proteins. So those kind of things can help lungs also. So it is not going to be present in the mouth. We may be holding it in the mouth, but the components, the biochemical components of the saliva will be going all around the body. So that's why many of the systems have this kind of practice. And this is referred in the yoga literature as nectar or amrut or milk in so many different ways. They have the way of saying it in kind of the not explicitly. They will denote it in some other way. So like nectar, amrut, milk, things like that.
Do you think that there's, obviously the research, there's more research needed with this stuff, but do you feel like that there's a cumulative effect to this, like it adds on to it, or is it just kind of like micro doses of when you're actually doing these exercises?
It will accumulate. Actually, I would say some of the principles are stimulated, and then they will go back to their basal level. right? Then you need another stimulation after a couple of hours. Then it gets another peak, goes down. It's like a refeeding cycle, right? So you need stimulation once in a while during the day, but you will have a different baseline. If you're a constant practitioner, your baseline will be different.
So more beneficial then to, instead of, as just using arbitrary times, like more beneficial to do a pranayama exercise, 5 times for 20 minutes each, rather than doing a 1 hour mega session during the day.
I wouldn't. It depends upon what we want to.
Oh, well, we'll say just in the context of the saliva production.
Yes, for saliva production, I would say spread it out for like a 10-minute session for 4 or 5 times a day. That is very good for this.
Mm. And you teach a lot of these breathing techniques as well, and I know you do workshops and things like that. Being a researcher and a scientist, what do you notice the most about people and breath in terms of the people, just the average person coming off the street that you notice that they're either kind of doing that's very supportive or not so supportive to their overall health?
So what in the beginning, even in the among our colleagues, there was some skepticism, like how are you going to do this, and people are not going to be accepting it. But when I approached people, they were very open to it. I teach at the Hope Lodge for cancer patients at the VA or in several studios, as you said. People are very, very open to it. The one thing is that the common practice around in the Western countries, and to some degree in the urban areas in India too, the asanas are the major form of exercise or form of yoga that is being practiced. So that is one thing that whenever we talk about yoga, people are kind of, okay, I'm not flexible, right? I cannot do yoga. So things like that, I get a lot. But once you tell them about the exercise, and they are very, very open to it. I see a lot of enthusiasm among the kind of those who have gone to some yoga asana practice, and then they are not stopping there. They want something more. So at that point, those at that point, they are very, very interested in learning this one. And of course, people who have read more about the yoga literature, they are into the breathing exercises. There is a lot of interest, I would say. People and sometimes people think it is kind of religious if we say yoga and even humming or chanting, they think it is religious. So I just want to make sure that it is not. It is a common practice, just like music. Music can be useful for anything. You can keep the music for devotional songs, or you can keep it for any other type of neutral songs or just wordless music. Yoga is like that. In my opinion, yoga is like music or any exercise. You can use it for any purpose. So yoga doesn't have to be following a specific religious ideology.
And I love the relationship to music too, in that music is both highly structured and highly improvisational, meaning that like to be able to improv, you have to practice a ton. But the idea is not to sit there in that rigid practice form, but to rather be able to express yourself through the music. And it's very similar to yoga, whether it's asana or otherwise, and doing things in life. Like, okay, you do these practices so that you can move more, we could say elegantly through life, or skillfully through life, of like, okay, I'm learning these things so that it's more natural and improv, and I've got a healthier body. I can move more freely. I can think in ways that are less restricted. So that's I really appreciate that metaphor.
So everybody can enjoy some music. They don't have to be Bach. They don't have to produce music, but everyone can enjoy music. In the same way, everyone can use some yoga practices. They don't have to be like seasoned practitioners for 20 years of meditation stuff like that. That is the major idea behind our acute exercises. Like, you don't have to be a seasoned yoga practitioner. Even if you do the exercise for 5 minutes, you will see changes in your system. That is the major message that I wanted to give.
And if you could suggest one thing to our listeners in terms of just something that they could do right now to affect their breath in such a way that it's going to impact their overall health, what would you suggest for people to do?
I really love humming. So humming is the one that you can do anytime, anywhere, when you drive, when you work, when you walk. Humming is a wonderful breathing exercise. All you need is to do is just take a nice, long, deep breath and then hum all the way out. So it goes like, when I take a deep breath, I just bulge the tummy out and then fill upwards, fill the lower ribs and the upper chest, and then hum all the way out. Like,
one of my favorite pranayamas is Brahmari.
Brahmari, right. Yeah, so it's Brahmari, we don't have to put the poses and fingers like that when we are working.
Might be kind of strange walking down the street with your ears plugged.
Yeah, so that's why I tell all my all those who attend my classes, this is a very easy breathing exercise. The number of breaths, if you count when you're humming, it is not going to be 15 breaths a minute. It is maybe 3 or 4 or less than 10 easily. So it is a very good breathing exercise. So if I want a sudden relaxation or sudden attention to the breathing, if I want to have bring my awareness to breathing, I started humming. So that brings a whole new picture.
Awesome. Well, I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing, and I get so excited whenever we see this clinical research being done in the realm of yoga, because it really brings an easier link for Western minds to grasp some of these ideas, and it helps to really validate some of these amazing practices that have been done for literally thousands of years to help show scientifically some of the more subtle things that are going on. So I think it's really great that you're doing the work that you are doing. Now, you've got your website, pranascience.com. Is that the best place for people to find out about you and your workshops and your research?
Yes, pranascience.com is my website. It was built by one of the very wonderful person, Pyle. She's managing it. Very, very good. And it has all the information about my upcoming workshops or videos, and it has links to some of the research articles that we published. And people can contact me. I do classes through Skype. I go to various places to teach and to conduct workshops. And I'm also doing a pranayama teach training this year.
And is that going to be online, or will that be in person?
It is going to be in person, right? It's going to be in person, pranayama teacher training. So we are planning that one, and there are so many other ways that people can get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to walk them through or introduce them to new techniques which are not yet popular in the mainstream yoga media.
And any plans in terms of your continued research? What's next on the research docket for your studies?
So the first thing is that I'm writing a book right now, which will be published very soon. This is on the 14 poems on pranayama that is written by Tirumular. I'm putting all the interpretation, scientific interpretation, into those 14 sutras or poems. That book is almost done. It will be published very soon. That is one thing. The second thing is that we are applying for grants to conduct research in multiple, patient populations. If you think about any given population, you can ADHD or PTSD, cancer, cardiopulmonary rehabilitation, stroke. You take any field, yoga can be an adjunct practice. It is not going to be replacing those. It is not an alternate to those. It is a very good adjunct practice to take some of the side effects or to make them feel a little better. So it can be useful in multiple areas. So every single investigator that I am talking to, they're all interested in using some of these techniques, especially the breathing exercises. They're very, very interested in it. In fact, our lab is Dr. Warren. We are trying to use that for people after lung cancer patients after radiation therapy. So we are writing proposals to get it funded. So that is the major bottleneck that we are facing right now. There are so many things that we can achieve, but we are working on the grants. So as soon as we get some grants, we'll be doing more research. That's awesome. The plan. It can be applicable to any disease or.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing future research, and I in particular look forward to reading your book when it comes out, whenever it does. That sounds super exciting. So, again, thank you, Sundar, so much for coming on the show today, for telling us about the exciting work that you're doing, and I'm sure that our listeners have learned a lot today.
Oh, thank you, Ashton. It was very nice talking with you and sharing some of the information. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you again for coming on the show. To all our listeners out there, I'm sure you have learned a lot. I hope you go and check out pranascience.com to help support the research that's being done as we want to continue to grow and expand all the research that's being done around yoga right now. It's really exciting stuff. And again, I hope you all have a wonderfully present moment. Thank you for listening. Namaste. Hey everybody, it's Ashton here with an announcement. We're starting a weekly contest giveaway over at Savannah Spirit. If you'd like to enter into the contest to win one of our weekly prizes, go to savannahspirit.com/contest. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast today, we'd really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes, left us a review, leave us some comments, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Also want to invite you to go check out Savannah East, which is the name of our blog and also the name of a Facebook group where I interact with guests and our audience. We'll post recent episodes up there as well as interesting articles relating to our guests and or the topics on the shows. And again, thank you so much for listening. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaheast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.